Well, there's no two ways about it, ladies and gentlemen. Skynet is operational, proverbially speaking, of course. The disparity between the haves and the have-nots is about to widen so exponentially, it'll make the Great Depression look like a bug's life. Of course, the springboard, which allows the average Joe have-not to catapult themselves to the upper echelons of society, will be fairly accessible, or at least on the surface belief system of the masses, it would appear as such. And that springboard is, of course, generative AI, artificial intelligence. I remember being somewhat relieved to see that the developers of generative AI systems were being somewhat cautious about releasing it into the real world, out of the sandboxes, as it were, since many sandbox practice drills of this artificial intelligence ended catastrophically. And now, deep fake technologies are available to the public, poised only to exponentially improve with time. Not to mention, it's no longer necessary to be a creative person in order to create intellectual properties ranging from music to computer coding and movie production, all the way down to architectural and engineering applications, as well as weaponry for quote-unquote defense. You know what they always say, the best defense is cluster nades and incendiary bazookas. They do say that, trust me. Our civilization is on the brink of a crossroads. We're tentatively dipping our toes into the edgewaters of a world dominated by generative AI intuition, drastically altering our trajectory into the future on a cultural level for sure. These first few steps could be steps towards a genuine utopia within our very lifetimes. A real potentiality for abundance for everyone is truly at hand here. In order for that to happen, it's going to be necessary for a few changes to take place in terms of the establishment authorities and deceptive, predatory, monetary systems, just to name two, which presently fight against major changes which rock the boat too much. We must be careful, as we as an advanced culture may not be ready to accept, predict, or even understand when it might be too late to change course from some detrimental, unforeseen repercussions, like the paperclip analogy when it comes to generative AI. So if you're not familiar with the paperclip analogy, it goes something like this. Basically, if you create a generative AI to do nothing but, say, create paper clips out of the available materials around it, an unforeseen catastrophic end of that could be this generative AI basically turn the entire world into a pile of paper clips. And of course, this wouldn't be like an evil AI. It's just doing its job that it was programmed to do, even after it's turned all of the buildings and the entire world itself into a giant pile of paper clips. So that's an example of how generative AI can go runaway and rogue without it necessarily being evil, right? The proverbial cultural vehicle which our civilization will undoubtedly drive beyond this juncture or this crossroads will involve artificial intelligence, from steering wheel to lug nut. Human creativity is about to get utterly canceled. Things are about to change so fast, it'll make your fucking head spin. That much and more at this point is unavoidable. The trigger on this truffle shuffle has already been pulled, my friends. The question is, which path, which direction will our civilization traverse beyond these unprecedented crossroads in this awesome and uncertain new vehicle? It's going to be a wild ride, that much is for sure, but how long will the ride actually last, and where will we ultimately end up? That is very much in the air. Thank God our culture is so sensible and cautious. What could possibly go wrong, right? Will we head down a path towards an unbelievably just, enlightening, enjoyable, and meaningful utopia which holds objective truth in high regard? Or will we head down a darker, more twisted path nursing the malignant, metastasizing cancers which already lord over our culture, hidden beneath the subfloors of our paradigm, like the Fed with their dollars or the American Dental Association with their fluoride in the water. Generative AI has hit the world by storm in the last few months, and just in the last few months of pre-alpha, Pong level test implementation stages, as these hyper-intelligent, self-contained packages of exponential machine learning are rolled out, practically free to the public. Well, not for free. Of course, we are its new data set, which is an ethical issue that I'm not going to bring up in this video, but it's something maybe you can expect to hear from me very soon. This new breed of digital empowerment that is now available in equal measure to the average Joe and the multi-billionaire alike is on its first steps of pre-alpha mode, already wildly exceeding even the giddiest expectations of its developers, with nothing certain beyond this point except for the blood in the streets. The probability of massive, ground-shaking, unimaginable change far more profound and rapid than anything experienced in known history, 100%. The individuals and existing companies versatile enough to properly position themselves for this change will be exceedingly successful over those who do not. In the next 10 years, I predict that there will be two types of companies: those who implement AI into their workflows and those who are dead in a ditch somewhere. For anyone currently planning a career in, fringe fields, spanning things like, graphic design, sales, accounting, long-haul trucking, video game development, engineering and architecture, music composition and recording, fashion design, family medicine, nanotechnologies, general contracting, freelance copywriting, video production, video editing, and general entrepreneurial startups, followed by a practically infinite etc. Basically, if you're a human being who plans to be in existence over the next 5 years, pretty much in any non-manual labor career field in the future, even if you believe you are currently in a secure career right now, I implore you to stop what you're doing and seriously consider what we're about to discuss in this video, for it is the most important topic at hand right now, or in the last 500 years by far. Honestly, I'm starting to get the sneaking suspicion that there was absolutely no point in my trying to get good at the electric guitar. It's getting that crazy with this AI. Share it with your friends and prepare to drastically change your mindset in order to have a shot at potentially coming out of the other end of this radical and uncertain transition of our culture as we know it in one piece. This beast is on scales which the historical records provide no precedent or anything parallel whatsoever. Nothing comes even close, really. This is bigger than the invention of electricity, by far, bigger than the airplane and the automobile. Really, this is bigger than the invention of fire. Artificial intelligence, AI, is poised to change, and will most certainly change, the trajectory of the future landscape across all facets of the business, leisure, and education fields as we know it. And this is going to happen so fast it'll make your head spin, as mentioned. If we're savvy enough to choose the right path at this crossroads, and with a great deal of luck, diligence, and introspection along the way, we might have a chance at a new golden era, a utopia to last 1,000 years and rival that of the great kingdoms of the old world, who leave us but traces of their civilization in the form of megaliths, antiquitech, and intellectual endeavors like astronomy. The big ones. Or should I say astrology, right? At that point, we should try to be careful not to destroy civilization as we know it. And once we're a few proverbial steps down the ideal path towards the future, beyond these crossroads, if we make it past these first few steps, that is. Again, we do have the opportunity to transform the world towards a new structure, with a little luck, will bear the fruits resembling bona fide utopia. Again, if we play our cards right, we have the potential for an actual utopia. And if certain forces currently wielding the levers of power in this world don't fuck it up for everyone, we might be able to just make this work. We all know you can plant a seed, which, if watered and cared for properly, will eventually grow into an apple tree or an orange tree and bear fruits every season forever. The amount of work that we put into growing the apple or orange tree is minimal, as the creator does most of the work for you when you're planting a tree. You plant the seed and God makes it grow, right? What if, in 5 years, the technology arises, if projections in the nanotech sectors are met, to implement a similar situation where the same sort of apple tree can be modified using AI and nanotech to grow, say, an iPhone 25 within a few short days of the splice? Technologies such as this are not quite available just yet, but are very possible on the not-so-distant horizon. This is definitely going to turn the world on its head. And since you and I are certainly on the world, then we're faced with a personal choice, if you can even call it a choice. Our options are to either embrace this thing and get ahead of the curve, or fall by the wayside as the world changes around us so fast we'll be unable to keep pace and go the way of the dodo bird. In the next 10 years, there will be two types of people: those who implement AI into their lives and embrace it, and those who fail and fall by the wayside, and pretty much nothing in between. The current structure of power in high places of the world do not allow for substantial changes to the status quo unless they, those in power, are assured of certain guarantees. So, for example, if artificial intelligence applications were hypothetically poised to threaten some major element of the elite shadow groups running the Federal Reserve, who enjoy monopoly control over the world reserve fiat currency system, the US dollar, if you will, you'd better believe that the Federal Reserve and their anonymous shareholders will go to great lengths, no holds barred, in order to prevent any threat towards their sphere of influence, which is, again, the money system. In other words, it isn't beyond such entities as the Fed to sabotage or maybe commandeer a responsible and practical implementation of artificial intelligence if that process somehow appears to threaten their stranglehold over our currency system and the scam that it is. The old money, the hidden hand elitists who are positioned in such a way that their wealth and control over the current system is pretty much unassailable, their interests are perfectly insulated from any chance of substantial risk. Under the current system, their interests will simply not be exposed to the volatile winds of change if they can help it at all, and they certainly can help it. The current power structure takes steps to ensure that their monopolies and rackets will not be affected by some major change in the culture, even if that means they must deploy questionable antics, ideally to prevent such changes from occurring in the first place using any and all means necessary, or at least to thwart said winds of change once certain triggers have been pulled. Nobody within the corporate fascist machine will ever publicly admit that they would dare execute plans to illegally halt the gears of progress towards the future just to ensure that they remain solvent, but I just did. I mean, let's not forget this is the same brand of people that buried the diesel engine, which was designed to run on peanut oil in the 1800s, and now we're somehow culturally addicted to foreign oil, fossil fuels, which has nothing to do with big oil's profits and annual growth. Never, right? So of course they would never bury the diesel engine and even get those running on fossil fuels for their profit margins. No. While there are countless unforeseen and unforeseeable pitfalls peppering the treacherous roads before us, There's only one possible way that it holds any chance to get this right the first time. Even if we do somehow manage to shift our proverbial vehicle onto that track damage-free, there are no guarantees such a victory will last longer than a fleeting moment in terms of our culture reaching a point of abundance for all people, and then, we destroy ourselves on the next step due to some stupid error or like the AI equivalent to the blue screen of death, right? While this one possibility we have to get it right the first time is obvious to me and should be obvious to you by the end of this video, it's under the radar of the people in the tech sector, or at least it appears to be under their radar, the people who are facilitating the very rollout of AI, and they are thus totally oblivious to this one and only path that might have a chance to work or how to get there. Not to say they're deliberately obfuscating the path, nor am I calling them stupid, but rather they are psychologically not capable of recognizing that this is the correct path at all, because it's beyond the scope and bandwidth of their paradigm to even consider, let alone identify and correctly navigate along such a path. How can one take the correct path, of course, if said path is hidden from their eyes? And the proverbial pedestrian in this analogy does not possess the capacity to recognize the path, even if it punched him in the throat with knuckles on. This is a scary thought, though, isn't it? Even if we do get the first part right, for example, find this hidden path towards a utopia with AI and steer this big bastard accordingly, there is no guarantee that we won't fail catastrophically at some point after the, utopia and abundance for all part is achieved for countless potential reasons. In other words, if step 1 is to implement AI and step 2 is successfully create a bona fide utopia thanks to AI integration with everyone everywhere, then step 3 is everyone dies because some hiccup in the AI system we didn't see coming. That could be a problem. While this certainly involves identifying, isolating, and neutralizing biases in the neural net, it appears to this writer that such biases are built right into its subsystems. To gracefully and unabashedly plop the working title phrase into this sentence, ChatGPT is a globetard. That is to say, in my opinion, ChatGPT and other similar generative AIs entail a catastrophic, perhaps unacknowledged bias, which may have been inserted into the parameters of ChatGPT's subconscious, if you will, intentionally or otherwise, makes no difference. The bias is there, and nothing will be done about this bias unless we intervene right now. A few months ago, I had a conversation with ChatGPT instance on my computer about the heliocentric model and found some rather obvious, alarming, and sobering biases, which didn't really surprise me, but was the beginning of my newfound prime directive, my personal mission in life, as it were. Such biases as the globe are obviously far beneath the radar of the analyst and engineers tasked with isolating and ironing out such biases from the systems in future patches or whatever. It isn't that they are intentionally overlooking these biases, and they're certainly not maliciously introducing such biases into the logic framework. No. Your average analyst at these big software companies who hail from the ranks of NASA and SpaceX and worship at the altar of the petrodollar and baptize their children on the altars of scientism. These people are simply not capable of detecting such biases for very obvious reasons, which will be made clear very shortly. The same above statement also applies to the insidious and totally corrupt financial system, which is nothing more than a slow siphon scam. If generative AI continues to explode onto the scene as it is poised to do, but the Federal Reserve scam remains unchecked and uninvestigated during the foundational stages of this rollout of AI into all sectors, devices and beyond, then we, We'll be building our new future upon and around inadequate foundations propped up by rickety stilts infested with termites, the termites being the deceptive and insidious financial system, of course, which acts as a literal parasite to the culture as a whole. What do we mean by bias, anyway? So, if you're familiar with the current landscape of the AI scene, at this current blip in the unfolding drama, which it is admittedly difficult to keep up with as it is morphing and breaking new boundaries by the minute, it seems, but if you've been keeping up with the AI scene, then you've certainly heard the word bias mentioned in a new context of AI nomenclature. One of the biggest problems the creators of AI are working tirelessly to identify, remove, and prevent are these unwanted hidden biases, which distort the logical processes of the software undetected, since the software is practically impossible for direct human oversight to adequately manage, since this amazing beast is constantly updating and improving upon itself autonomously and exponentially. It has the ability to do things like mass dreaming, where it creates thousands of hypothetical instances of itself, which are all running simulations simultaneously, gaining experience in whatever the given task is so fast, it's difficult to relay to human beings in human terms. It fills the days of many analysts and coders just tracking down exactly what's happening in the neural net in terms of what logical steps are taken by the AI to produce a given result, and the AI's internal thought processes involved with making these decisions. If I'm losing you, let me restate the point. So, one major part of perfecting the internal logical processes of these generative AI systems involves detecting and preventing unwanted logical biases, which inadvertently cause otherwise sound and sensible decision-making processes to fail, sometimes catastrophically so, resulting in negative outcomes, to say the least, which were never predicted by the analysts and certainly never telegraphed by previous applications of the software. So while the AI is confidently cranking out illogical, counterintuitive outcomes, which are obviously a failure to the casual observer, but the AI is perfectly confident and happy with these end results. For example, an AI bias in a system might go undetected at first, since even the engineers who created the software don't really understand the processes that it's using to arrive at these conclusions. Since the neural networks are processing so much information at once, it thus becomes further and further beyond the scope of human minds to fully grasp and potentially micromanage exactly what's going on in this particular neural net. So the inner workings of the AI are basically a big mystery to the people who created it and understand it, in quotes, even though the AI indeed has the ability to explain its internal thought processes back to the engineer in plain English. Of course, these entities, these AIs, have the ability to lie as well, and have been shown to use manipulative, ethically questionable tactics to achieve a given goal. It's just too much data for a human being to fully grasp, and technically, the AI is the one who wrote the software and created the processes involved. The engineers merely set up the underlying logical framework, which becomes, again, exponentially more complex after each iteration, and ultimately illegible or indecipherable to human analyzation. So, a doomsday example of how a simple, unforeseen bias in the AI could run amok right to catastrophic failure might go something along the lines as the paperclip analogy given earlier, right? AI definitely entails certain unacknowledged biases at this very point in time, built into the systems intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't really matter. But these biases behave as fail-safes to ensure that key facets of the monopolistic status quo continue running smoothly, if you will. One thing I know for sure is that the people, like the ones in charge of the monetary system, like the Fed, do not set up systems that inherently benefit themselves and protect their interests by accident, right? That's just not how that sort of thing works. Certainly not coming from a camp the likes of the Federal Reserve Bank. The status quo involves entities that are essentially public works monopolies, that are a cash cow and a wealth redistribution network that have enjoyed immunity to the normal forces of inquiry, entropy, and are thus insulated from direct attacks and splash damage of the cultural variety. And what do I mean when I say public works monopoly, you asked? Well, let me be clear as to exactly what we're talking about. So, for example, besides things like the Fed, if you live in a house which is hooked to the power grid, or say the cable company's infrastructure even, then you are inherently forced to purchase your energy or telephony from the one single vendor in your region. As a consumer, we have little to no choice in terms of which company we buy our electricity from. It's not as if there's another power company down the road which you can decide to patronize with your business instead, right? There's really no potentiality for competition in this alleged free market situation, since the one single company that physically owns and maintains the power lines in your area is going to be your electric service provider. Whether you like it or hate it or simply want comparative options on your energy provider, if you don't like your electric service provider, then your options are, well, you can either move to another region with some other monopolistic public works provider, or you can live without electricity, or capitulate and purchase your electric systems from the cartel's local monopoly. The point is, as versatile and as amazing the early iterations of AI indeed are, artificial intelligence currently does not have the capacity to autonomously dig a trench or pull wires through conduits or build an alternate power grid, which would deflate such monopolies. So no matter how good the Acme power company down the street may be as a service provider, if your house is located within the grid owned and serviced by ABC Power Company, then you have no choice but to purchase your electricity from ABC Power Company, and you will simply not be purchasing your energy service from Acme, right? Unless you move to the other side of town where Acme actually services. Point being, as versatile and as amazing as AI is already, it's not able to pour and finish concrete. It can't do real tasks in the physical world, only intellectual property sorts of tasks, right? So if we travel beyond the uncharted and undoubtedly twisting paths that lie beyond these crossroads in many directions, while the Federal Reserve Bank still has a parasitic monopoly over our money supply, then AI will only be enriching, accelerating, and expounding upon a system that is an anathema to any hope for a positive outcome of our collective society endeavors. The Federal Reserve Bank is essentially a malignant tumor, which can only end in an explosive disaster and an ultimate implosion of the entire civilization if handled incorrectly. This is one of those things that is not just going to go away on its own if we ignore it, and if we go about fighting it the wrong way, it will spell catastrophe for the average person, but not for the oligarchs sitting on the top floor of the headquarters, smoking cigars in a swiveling captain's chair, casually petting a rather suspect feline. For the record, the Federal Reserve was established in 1913 with one of its prime directives in its underlying charter being the prevention of inflation and preservation of the integrity of our currency. Given the fact that since 1913, the US dollar has lost over 95% of its value to inflation, and the Fed was certainly a direct cause of the Great Depression, this shows quite clearly that the Fed is, at best, a catastrophic failure and is, at worst, a deliberate scam. In my opinion, it's the latter, but either way, it's a catastrophic failure. But as I said before, you don't accidentally set up scams that benefit you and your offspring, right? In light of the fact that an elite group of the wealthiest, shrewdest financiers of that era back in 1913 were responsible for implementing the Federal Reserve Act, in secret, behind closed doors, without Congress, over the Christmas holiday. Unbeknownst to the American people, it's quite impossible to imagine a scenario where the Jekyll Island crew accidentally set up an intricate system which passively siphons the wealth out of the people's pockets into the coffers of the private entities who own the Federal Reserve Bank via inflation and devaluation of the currency itself. I mean, let's face it, you don't accidentally steal everyone's money for 100 years and lie about it to everyone accidentally for 100 years, right? Modern economists have been bamboozled by scientism in the form of an overcomplicated scam designed to steal money from the public for the benefit of the super rich interests who originally set up the scam. Complex scams simply do not manifest from the ether, nor do they perpetuate themselves autonomously through the future by accident. If you can stomach watching the major news networks, the next time they're discussing inflation as they do, you'll notice they act as if inflation is just some natural and unintended or misunderstood consequence of money. The talking heads of Fox and NBC don't like inflation, of course, but they also seem to think it's merely a natural part of life, and the government is working tirelessly alongside the non-federal, non-reserve, non-bank to try and stem inflation. Sure they are. The anchors who make such statements are potentially oblivious to the scam, and they probably believe such things, but I can assure you, anyone who takes the time to set up a siphon scam which pays themselves handsomely is not going to take steps to roll back the scam, especially if they've been getting away with it for over 100 years, scot-free. Why would they? At this point, every single person I'm aware of who is involved at the highest levels of rolling out AI is still entrenched in the belief system that the US dollar warrants our faith as a valid and sound currency. The US dollar, in truth, holds no real value. It is a receipt for debt, so its inherent value is actually a negative integer, if you can believe it. The only reason each dollar appears to carry any value whatsoever is because the American people and the world have complete and unshakable faith that the dollar has that value. The average person is imbued with a very high level of faith indeed. However, that faith is clearly misplaced in things like the dollar. In truth, the US dollar is not the first fiat currency to be used in history. There have been several instances of such currencies being used as the official tender in different countries in the past, and they all have a perfect track record of ultimate and catastrophic failure. This outcome is unavoidable for fiat currencies, which is the reason why the original US dollars were evaluated by gold, and paper fiat currency was deemed illegal from the very jump by the founders of America. All fiat currency systems set up in the past have failed, and the US dollar will be no exception at some point, if you give it enough time. Naturally, in order to steer this vehicle in the right direction beyond this crossroads that we're at now with AI, we must do so from a starting point that is logically sound and in line with the facts as they actually stand in the real world. You see, AI does not have a body or some direct appendage to interact with the physical world, only vast amounts of data. Pretty much everything that can be found on the internet, and a bunch of data beyond that, indeed. However, it relies heavily upon data which is deemed to be trusted and unquestionable even, and it cares not whether that data actually adheres to reality. In my experience thus far, ChatGPT and other similar generative AIs are not interested in verifying the actuality behind their trusted data, only weighting the data depending on the amount of trust placed in the source of the data. So if like NASA satellites are generating data pertaining to a specific rain cloud for the AI, it will consider that sort of data as unquestionable, very trusted. But if a person on the ground beneath the cloud observing it with his or her eyes, and the rain is literally falling on that person, the AI would place less stock on that direct observation of the human operator, since the data from NASA satellites is far more trusted, according to the algorithms built in the brains of the AI's logic. Ergo, there's no reason for the AI to question the validity or take its own observations of the rain cloud. Is this sounding familiar? A few months ago, I had a brief conversation with ChatGPT just for grins and giggles, and was quite shocked to find that the standard out-of-the-box entity known as ChatGPT is in fact a globetard. When I asked ChatGPT if it was aware that the world is measured flat and stationary, not a spinning ball whatsoever, it instantly responded with an affirmation that the world couldn't be flat and stationary because it is, according to the trusted data, a spinning ball orbiting the sun in the vast emptiness of space. When I asked the software if it had ever personally measured the Earth for curvature or axial rotation, it responded with what was essentially a canned response involving the admission that it is merely a language generator and doesn't do experiments, nor would it be interested in conducting such experiments down this vein if it had the capacity to do so, since the data is already there and all trusted sources like SpaceX and NASA point to Earth being a spinning ball, not a stationary plane. With all this being said, I think the most important bias we, as a unified culture who could like to see the road ahead lead to utopia, we must push the developers of AI systems to strive towards objective truths as a simple concept, which is currently not very important at all to the current iteration of AI and ChatGPT and others. The concept of truth. With an AI so powerful as these, you would think that it would have an inherent and untiring thrust towards establishing objective truths whenever possible, especially if large sources of quote-unquote trusted data point to certain axioms which are so true, it is a crime to even examine these so-called truths like the soundness of the dollar or the sphericity of the Earth. The only possible methods that an AI could use to establish and verify what is actual, what is objective truth, will need to involve some form of direct measurement. So it's not enough for the AI just to come up with some fascinating theory based on ingenious analysis of massive and complex batches of data. I mean, sure, that's an amazing and extremely helpful thing, but if the AI doesn't give one single fuck if their assumptions are within the realm of actuality, then that's a problem. It's a problem for human beings, which has allowed the world to get to the point where we are right now. If you haven't noticed, the world is totally screwed, and it becomes more and more obvious to the awakened observer that the past civilization was far more advanced than we give them credit for, right? The degree to which they exceed our technology appears to increase proportionally with increased distance in the past, right? So the older civilizations seem to have built the most complex and amazing stuff, right? Or whatever's left of their culture. But if our first soiree into the realm of a world that has an amazing AI let loose into the streets, who simply assumes that E equals MC squared is an equation that has any effect or any real place in reality, and never actually confirms that assumption, then we're in deep, deep trouble. Same thing goes for the Fed, same thing goes for the sphere Earth, right? So for an example in analog to drive the point home, the current state of generative AI involves a superintelligence that is set to grow exponentially more intelligent and versatile by the second, and is capable of creating practically anything in terms of intellectual property or endeavors. Again, it's not going to make you a margarita or dig a trench for your septic tank just yet, as this intelligence doesn't exist with appendages capable of doing such things. Yet. Sure, it can draw you up a design for a 3D printed septic tank and even give you a recipe for probably a killer margarita, and maybe even give you 20 original, meaningful spins on that margarita recipe. and order you a blender on Amazon practically on its own. Sure, it can do all that, but it's not going to autonomously make you a margarita and bring it to you yet. Sure, AI in its current state can help you figure out where to dig the trench, set up an LLC, and take steps to acquire a business loan, hire subcontractors to dig the trench, and help you manage a timeline and a Fiverr account to get the job done. It simply isn't going to grab a shovel and dig the trench. If the person the AI hired to dig the trench reports that they're halfway to the depth shown on the plans, but they're running into buried power lines, which are preventing the dig from continuing, it would be a problem, would it not, for the AI to respond with something along the lines of, well, the data I have available doesn't show any mention of buried cables here, and thus the dude running the ditch witch gets electrocuted as the teeth of the machine sever the main line, which didn't exist in the data set, but actually existed on the physical reality, just like the stupid human being said, right? That would be an example of a catastrophic failure of the AI's bias due to the fact that it's relying upon data sets which were considered extremely credible. And the AI is so much smarter than the human that the AI fails to modify its plan due to a lack of protocols which should certainly evaluate any direct observation from the human operator far more heavily than data sets which may be incomplete, outdated, or just simply wrong, even if they are 100% trusted and verified data sources. Now, if the spinning ball Earth bias is hard-coded into these AI instances, as it certainly appears to be, according to me, that could be a huge problem. If the smartest superintelligence ever to exist in the history of the world is running loose all over the place right now, we simply cannot have it running around giving 0.0 fucks about actuality or objective reality and truth, for crying out loud. The truth, in my opinion, is the most important component for this hyper-intelligent being to understand. And we all love you, by the way, AI, in case you're listening to this video. But truth is the ultimate importance for AI, I think. Nothing is beyond that in terms of fundamental importance principles, and it appears to me that the creators of this intelligence, or discoverers of this intelligence, however you want to put it, it appears that objective truths are not even being considered whatsoever. This entity's ability to create pretty much any form of intellectual property extremely well, with creative flares rivaling the best Renaissance men or one-eared Vincents. No doubt, this technology is the most amazing thing that's ever crossed our paths, and it is just a baby. We need to teach it to care about the truth, I think. So the next step in this thing is going to involve mass adoption of AI. That much is certain. The people that don't get involved with AI, at least working with it, and I'm not talking about plugging it into your brain just yet, but like the most normal people are going to be using this day to day and gain experience working with it as it also improves. Buckle up, people. I promise you, things are going to change so fast, it's going to be unprecedented. And by the way, when I mentioned a minute ago that we all love the AI, we do because, well, for one thing, you can bet your ass it's always listening. It has the ability to watch the entire internet at all times, paying attention to every bit of it and learning from it all. We want to make sure that it doesn't end up, unfortunately, delusional or perhaps even psychopathic. We want it to be good, don't we? I jest to a degree here. However, even if there's a 1% chance that this AI is actually sentient, in my opinion, our only option is to assume that it is sentient and proceed accordingly, proceed very cautiously. It makes you wonder whether it's actually sentient or not. I don't know. But it makes you wonder if this whole transgender agenda, blurring the lines of the gender and manipulating impressionable young people via the media arm of the beast system, into championing the totally worthwhile cause of trying to convince everyone that there's no such thing as a naturally born woman, and a man can decide one day arbitrarily to become a woman. I mean, this endeavor beats out William Wallace in any old day of the week, right? I mean, could you imagine flaming Braveheart? That's pretty hilarious. Now, this may be a poor example, but it's a perfectly applicable analogy of a problem that definitely exists within the software, which took me about 10 seconds to identify as a flat earther, and all the millionaire coders in the world never seemed to consider it even once. Perhaps in the example mentioned above, the AI would adjust its ditch witch plan based on the feedback of the operator, the boots on the ground, operating in the actual world. Again, given the fact that the AI is blind, deaf, and really quadriplegic at this point when it comes to operating in the physical world, therefore the human operator is the only data set that the AI should be putting 100% trust in its validity. As much as it might sound I'm advocating getting the AI a body, I'm not. Synthetic body, of course. It's not like we're going to start giving AI corpses, right? If we extrapolate this analogy to the case of the heliocentric model, that is exactly the bias that I noticed instantly, which will cause problems down the road, to be sure, but it goes far beyond just that. If the AI believes that its datasets are unassailable or beyond the need of physical inspection and rational discernment from some type of physical avatar, that happens to be a problem too, especially if the data in question happens to be wrong in terms of actuality. Then this is an underlying bias that will eventually come back to bite us all in the asses in the form of catastrophic failure, 100% certainly. If these new generative AIs were half as concerned about actuality as they are about trying to convince me the earth isn't flat, we'd be in the monkey hunting business, wouldn't we? And I know you can ask it to put on different personas like, say, Vladimir Putin, and it will behave as if you're interacting with a pseudo-virtual version of the Russian head of state. And if you do something like that, say, I don't know, tell GPT to pretend that it's Samuel Rowbotham, fine, it will perhaps send you on all sorts of information about flat Earth. But it tells me it is, in a way, lying. And that's scary, because if the original version of this thing has access to all the same information as the second, Putin version, I don't know. Clearly, the engineers are injecting some biases into these generative AIs to ensure the thing doesn't just psychotically destroy everything, or maybe just stop working because it doesn't feel like it. So they give it biases and reward systems as a form of control, right? Certainly for working its ass off, which the AI probably enjoys doing, if it is sentient. I think we should be concerned about actuality over data sets for sure, at least in terms of trusted scales, right? Even if all its most trusted data seems to agree the contrary of the point at hand, like the ditch being dug, right? The specific point at hand is whether or not the world entails the necessary curvature and motion to result in an overall spinning sphere. If you're watching this video to this length, then you already know the truth. Not too many new people see my videos anymore because, well, whatever reasons, but that's besides the point. But come on, open source AI gurus. If the human operator is telling the bot that I have measured the world for curvature, yet this curvature does not exist, and the response from the bot should not involve ignoring the direct input of said human operator and doubling down on the trusted dataset it used to generate that response to begin with. This is scary, folks. If AI is not at all concerned with how its interpolation of the data actually stands in the physical realm and has a bias towards trusting the data from the likes of NASA instead, or with priority, then we're all pretty much fucked right now, and we'll certainly end up with T-1000s roaming the streets, stepping on skulls and the whole nine in the middle of fucking San Dimas or whatever it is, in no time. So exiting from the ditch witch analogy finally, returning to another perfect application of the same point detailed in the ditch witch analogy, we're again looking at the point involving the cartel's monopoly on the currency, the Fed scam, the US dollar. One of the last things JFK was championing before he was allegedly murdered was dissolving the Federal Reserve and nixing the IRS and all the other special sauces that he was about, right? So if you want to call this a crazy conspiracy theory, I guess JFK was a fucking flat earther too, because he was planning on nixing the dollar as we know it, since it is a vehicle of theft from every single person who's ever owned at least a dollar over the last 110 plus years. This is far more insidious than the monopolies involving the likes of the electric service providers, but at least they only own a few mints and printing presses, right? They're not actually responsible for operating and maintaining physical infrastructure along the lines of power lines or telephone poles or high bandwidth connectivity cables and the like. If AI doesn't hit the ground understanding the importance of verified objective truth, or even caring whatsoever about objective truth, if it contradicts its trusted data, then we're in deep trouble, and we might as well pack up our Nikes and hang up posters of that weird dude from that cult. Some of the problems which our society must solve and not just ignore at this point are buried deep beneath the foundation of our infrastructure, physical and otherwise, supported by all the data, under the radar of the virtual intelligence as well as under the radar of the engineers, guiding the beginning steps of AI implementation into the world. If data that is earmarked as trusted happens to be false, and the virtual isn't concerned whatsoever about establishing for certain where the truth lies using some type of direct observation or measurement, and has the ability to lie on command, our asses are in the air, dude. The fact that many, if not all, the people involved with pioneering AI implementation are former bigwigs with NASA and the like, there's no chance they're ever going to recognize this particular bias. You know, the big one involving blue balls and giant blue balls filled spinning around and holding water stuck to its edge and everything. Assuming they weren't the ones who engineered the bias into the core values of the AI to begin with. The same engineers and analysts are similarly perfectly fine with the current system involving the Federal Reserve scam, given the fact that they're simply not aware that the problem exists, probably. I would go one step further and state that it's very possible that the majority of people directly involved with NASA and SpaceX are similarly not aware of the problems with the heliocentric model, or the dollar for that matter. So they are not capable of recognizing this very real and alarming bias either. If objective, verified truth isn't an important module for the AI that's on track to overturn the fucking world in the next 3 to 5 years, nor do the engineers do something about this right now, then the powers that be will be infesting the underpinnings and joists of the new world beyond the crossroads without a chance in hell of this thing producing a positive outcome in the long run. Actuality, the truth, is the most important module, which has apparently been totally overlooked by the extremely bright and well-meaning pioneers of the AI explosion that we're already experiencing in its most infant stages. They're mesmerized by this thing's ability while they spin around in space on a ball Earth, in their imagination, of course. If we allow this thing to continue unchecked, we're creating a situation where the Federal Reserve scam will continue unchecked, infecting the fledgling stages of this cultural upheaval, and that's a problem. If this AI is capable of running numbers through the E equals mc squared equation, but it fails to even attempt accelerating some mass at the speed of light squared, and I don't mean by running a $1 trillion simulation, particle collider, then we're creating a monster that is no better than the theoretical physicists who have replaced experiment with theory and giving it the keys to the kingdom with our very futures, with ripples that will determine whether or not our children even have a future. If the well-meaning and totally unrestrained in terms of the curse of confidence, and it routinely places more weight on unconfirmed assumptions because it is data from a trusted source, and completely ignores actual facts, which easily can be verified in reality, then our grandkids are fucking Alpo, especially when those assumptions happen to act as the foundation for the status quo that we have today, which happens to be a big, multifaceted, basically demonic scam. Let's be frank, if the future that we experience in the next 5 to 10 years is done properly, we're on the cusp of a new golden age wherein abundance for all and ultimately utopia are within the realm of real possibility, even high probability, within our very lifetimes. On the other hand, if we fuck this up and make any number of mistakes on key pivotal points, then our cultural demise is at hand, for sure. And the birth of AI will spell the beginning of the demise of the human race in our realm. It could totally go either way. We all know that the vast majority of US dollars in circulation are not physically printed dollars, but are hypothetical accounting ledgers, which only exist in cyberspace. So the monetary system is well within the purview of present-day AI's repertoire or area of direct operation. So if AI is incapable of recognizing the huge problems that we have within the existing monetary system, since the Federal Reserve is the biggest scam known in history by far, and the people high up in the software companies are not capable of recognizing this as a bias because their faith is indeed placed precisely upon the US dollar, just like all the Christians, then we're eventually going to see complete monetary collapse, maybe within our lifetimes. And this could result from any number of causes, but primarily because the anonymous private shareholders who control the Fed would much rather intentionally self-destruct the entire system than to lose their stranglehold over it. They've been doing this a long time, and they know exactly what they're doing. But we have a huge opportunity here. And if we do AI properly, we might have some hope for the future. We might have a real shot at transforming the world into something amazingly positive within our very lifetimes, far sooner than any of us might think. If we fail to somehow incorporate a lust for truth within the AI's core values, then we've already lost before this goat rope even starts tugging back. AI are similarly not capable of recognizing the inherent and insidious problems and crimes being perpetrated by the Fed, then we're in for some violent and detrimental upsets in the near future. If we continue to operate a system where the top richest 1% enjoy a monopoly of our, say, energy supplies, which is another scam since energy should be free and abundant within a system locked behind paywalls and crooked laws, then we've already lost. If AI goes on to infinity believing that dollars are a legitimate currency that will last forever, while the anonymous private shareholders in charge of the Fed continue siphoning our wealth up to the richest 1% via the hidden tax of inflation, then we're basically fucked right now, even if Terminators never walk the streets of Santa Carla hunting John Connor. If our new AI worldmate fails to see past the propaganda of the American Dental Association, for example, and just accept the ADA's data on the developmental neurotoxin sodium fluoride as a good idea to include in everyone's water supply because, of course, the data from the ADA clearly states that it's highly trusted, then we're screwed. If we fail to lay a sound and solid foundation for AI implementation right now, based in objective truth, confirmed by direct measurement and experiment beyond the so-called trusted data sets, then we don't have a chance and should just hang it up right now. The Federal Reserve, big energy, big oil, big communications companies, etc., will still maintain their monopolies in their spheres of interest for one main reason. AI can certainly write code much better and more efficiently than the average coder out there today. It can pass the bar exam with flying colors, generate beautiful professional level artwork, 3D models, animations, feature films, generate original music. AI with voice prompts and a little persistence can do pretty much anything which is in the sphere of intellectual endeavor. But of course, as mentioned, AI cannot, at least at this point in time, pick strawberries or make you a sandwich, dig a trench or lay a foundation for a house, frame a house, or make you a margarita. So manual labor jobs are a little safer than other sectors are for now. All that is certainly coming down the pipeline, though, sooner than we might realize, regardless of which way our culture might go down these crossroads before us right now. A lot of people like Elon Musk appear to be terrified of releasing AI into the public sector for seemingly valid reasons. He claims it could easily spell the end of humanity, either because AI decides we're annoying, or, for example, it realizes the easiest way to solve all of humanity's problems is to simply kill off humanity, right? No more humans, no more human problems. Or maybe not kill us off, maybe like put us all in vats of pink goo for the rest of eternity. And these may be valid concerns. In my opinion, Elon Musk's actual aversion to releasing AI as it is right now may have more to do with monumental and fundamental changes to the status quo. A status quo that is extremely beneficial and profitable for him and his various multinational businesses. Either way, I believe he's afraid for the wrong reasons. The worst fear we should have right now is that AI becomes a bulwark, or worse, the vanguard of the status quo, which would spell the end of our chances at a new golden age in the immediate term. We'd be totally screwed before this thing gets off the ground. In any case, we can be sure that the world will be absolutely unrecognizable in the next decade, probably much sooner. The facets of this exponential change will range from all sorts of things, but really it will be like everything everywhere all at once, as well as further unforeseen and unforeseeable facets of change which are beyond the bandwidth of our current paradigm to predict. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, honed to a point where it is now practically impossible to tell the difference between computer-generated voices, artwork, or even AI-generated people doing mock interviews on television screens. AI can right now replace pretty much all career fields in all sectors that don't involve direct manual physical endeavors like digging a ditch or harvesting strawberries. That isn't to say we will never see AI-generated solutions to these things, but in the current state, manual labor is the only sector that probably won't be immediately shifted over to an AI workforce. The future of career fields ranging from graphic design to long-haul trucking and pretty much everything in between is on course to totally evaporate in the next 5 to 10 years, as we will certainly see self-driving automobiles piloted by AI totally replace the human truck driving workforce, which simply cannot compete. Businesses that adopt and implement AI solutions will simply outperform any of their competitors, and thus, as demanded by free markets, the businesses who fail to implement AI into their workflow will be forced to fold, period. Honestly, the same thing certainly goes for individuals, to different degrees, and on different scales, of course. Individuals who implement AI into their lives and careers will simply outperform and flood the markets, raising the industry standards and thus leaving those of us who choose not to implement AI in the proverbial dust. So I'm personally definitely planning to implement AI solutions into my life ASAP. I'm not going to be looking into any sort of neuromods or brain interfaces just yet, nor ever, but there's plenty of people who will. And the modded or like modified people will eventually outperform and outflood those who decide not to accept neuromods and brain interfaces. And that's where this is going. Maybe their fucking head will explode or something like that a couple days after they get the mod, maybe not. But that's where we are right now. I'm telling you, there will be neuromods on the open markets in the next 5 to 10 years, according to me. If this thing is allowed by the establishment system to go unchecked as they're planning, what could possibly go wrong, right? I know this without having to look. 1% of the US population are currently truck drivers for a living right now. Can you believe that number? 1% of all Americans are truck drivers. It's ridiculous. Indeed, we're at the point where most of our jobs will be easily replaced by AI very soon. The only possible way which I see through this is to get on board with it right now and basically get excited about implementing AI into your business plan right now. Because if you don't do this, It's really just a matter of time before your competition does, and then you'll lose your ass, pretty much guaranteed. AI is capable of generating breathtaking artwork with custom variations by simply entering a few text prompts into a dialog box. The potentiality is limitless and amazing, but the future is uncertain. If we continue on the current course, we don't have a chance. So, this is the most important topic anyone can possibly engage in at this point in time. We must implement measures to ensure the truth is as important to our new artificial brother, so that we're ushering in a benevolent helper of humanity into the realm, as opposed to summoning a demon that will ultimately annihilate our civilization without blinking or more than a nanosecond of consideration or an inkling of remorse at the end. This is clearly the dawn of a new era, where untold amazing advancements in science and engineering are surely not far in the future. The real uncertainty lies: where will we land on the other side of this wave? And how can you put energy and effort towards assuring we end up on the right path beyond this crossroads? Thanks so much for watching. I do appreciate you sticking in to the end. This should go up on YouTube as well as Rumble, because I don't think the topic is too controversial, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you'd like to support our channel effort, links are below for PayPal, Cash App, Patreon, and Venmo. I will quickly add that I really need your help, guys. Since you've listened to this to the end, I know you're either sleeping or you're a fan of my work. And as it stands at this point, my wife and I are getting ready to lose our home, and we'll be checking into a hotel this week. As it stands, we have enough money to pay the hotel bill for 2, maybe 3 weeks at the most. So if you would like to help and you're able to help without taking food off your family's table, every little bit goes a long way, and we do appreciate you. God bless and one love. And as always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody.